Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything from the Pistons to the NBA draft and the Motor City Cruise.
And Blake, I don't know if anyone had any illusions that this wasn't fully winter yet, but I think the whole state of Michigan just got the wake-up call here early in December. I know in the Grand Rapids area, it's been I think 4 or 5 inches of snow over the past couple of days. To be fair, I'm in Chicago, so I've avoided it, luckily, but we're kind of stranded here. We couldn't go back tonight like we were kind of hoping to do. So I don't know how bad it's been in the Detroit area, but I know the whole state's been getting snow.
Yeah, last night and into today, just some pretty crazy wind and snow.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
I was texting you, but obviously when the first cold of the year or brutal cold happens, my furnace decided to go out. And I knew it was older.
Of course, right?
Yeah, it always works out that way. Knew it was an older unit, was going to have to do something about it eventually. And luckily it's not totally out. It just goes on and off. So I have to walk to the basement, try to reset it. And today it's been cooking most of the day. Just waiting to get someone out. So that's a bummer, but overall it's been okay. If I've never experienced that before. So when everyone deals with it, it's just not fun.
Yeah, I've only experienced it once before in my life. My family's got a little cottage out on Coldwater Lake, just a really old 1940s building. But I was there one day with my wife, and as we were sleeping overnight, the furnace goes out, and it's -5 degrees outside. So we had to get the little space heater, right? Sounds like the exact same stuff you were doing, but I don't know. That was a much smaller house than what I know you've got. So I think yours is a little worse.
Oh no, it's
tough luck,
I can't complain. I can only imagine it by the water and everything too. But it's been one night, I think it was Monday night into Tuesday, we woke up and was oh, it seems pretty cold in here, and it just went off, and was able to get it off and on. And then last night we brought our 10-month-old son back into our bedroom, because we were we'll all just stay in the same room, have a space heater. And then luckily I put the space heater on a timer, and then we didn't end up needing it because the furnace held up all night, and it's done that today too. So I can't complain. And yeah, I know I'm probably complaining too much. People don't want to hear about my furnace, but man, it's brutal when that stuff goes down.
And I'm sure you've just been getting the most amount of sleep possible with that setup that you just described. It could only be smooth sailing, I'm sure, right?
We're
how the Pistons have been playing this week. Smooth sailing only.
We're just being so quiet because obviously the little guy goes to bed super early. So we're just being really quiet when we go to bed, getting ready for bed in the darkness, trying to tiptoe in. And we're normally fall asleep with the TV on and a sleep timer kind of people. So we're not doing that right now, which is actually kind of nice, kind of change of place. But yeah, it's different for sure.
It's like growing up when you'd go to those hotels as a family, right? And you're all sharing the room, and your parents are over on the one bed, and they're watching TV, they're reading their books with the lights on, but it's bedtime for you guys. And it's so bright, you got the TV, I don't want to go to sleep, but no. You got to go to sleep anyway. That's the opposite for you, because now it's the kid that's got the power.
Hey Wes, they have this thing that we bought that we haven't used it yet, but we're gonna use it for travel. It's called a sleep pod, and it's essentially a tent you can put over a crib. So if you're in a hotel room and you have to put the kid down early, they can have their darkness, but you don't have to. You can keep the lights on and whatever. So interesting. They make everything these days.
See, that's something they need in multiple sizes. One of those they need to make big enough to put over an entire queen-sized hotel bed. That's what they need.
I would love to sleep with something like that.
It sounds phenomenal. But all right, I feel like that's probably enough beating around the bush a little bit. We got 2 games really that are important to talk about. Obviously, that Bucks game and then the Celtics game just from the other night. We are recording on Thursday before the Lions game, so go Lions. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, they have won against the Packers on Thursday Night Football. But regardless, we're recording before that Knicks game too. So looking at the Bucks game, I think the easiest place to start is all of the threes, right, that the Bucks hit. So why don't we start there? What was your assessment, shall we say, of the defense in that game?
Yeah, I mean, the big story to me from both the Bucks and the Celtics game is just this team is giving up way too many open threes. And I mean, a lot of it is individual defense effort, group defense effort. I think part of it is game plan too. Like when we were talking a couple weeks ago about why the defense had a much improved defensive rating. I think a lot of it was because JB's game plan was to take away the paint, live with threes if they happen. But then when you play a team like Milwaukee, who comes out and they're on pace for like the best 3-point shooting game in history in the first half, and then you have a team like the Celtics the next night that Sam Hauser kills you at one point, Peyton Pritchard kills you at one point, and like the Pistons made the most threes themselves against the Celtics for that they have so far this season, but it's just too tough to keep up with. And I think a lot of it was just scrambling, getting lost in ball screens, like not thinking that you should switch, and you guys just aren't on the same page. And Boston was getting a lot of mismatches that they wanted to. So I think a lot of it was, I don't want to blame the schedule either. Road back-to-backs traveling are tough, but it was just the same theme against Milwaukee and Boston to me. Just have to find a way to limit the open threes, or just at least pressure the perimeter more.
Right. And I mean, look, I think I'm hoping that this is going to end up being a big positive for the team, okay? Because what happened here is what good teams do in high pressure situations. The Bucks very clearly wanted to win that game pretty badly. They came out with a lot of intensity, right? And so they did kind of treat it like kind of like what we've been saying. It's not quite a playoff game, but maybe it's a seeding game where it matters, but it's not knockout or anything like that, right? So that's kind of how the Bucks seem to approach the game. And what they did was they found one little thread of weakness in the Pistons defense, and they just kept tugging on it and tugging on it and tugging on it until the whole fabric fell apart. And all that they found, it was actually really simple. All they did was turn the corner. That was it. So they were getting the Pistons in drop coverage and in hedge situations, a lot of times with Damian Lillard initiating, so that you were forcing the on-ball defender to go up and over the screen. And all they were trying to do was turn the corner and get downhill so that you force a scramble situation on a kickout. And the problem with that for at least Detroit is that it's forcing their bigs, namely Jalen Duren, to then X out all the way to the opposite weak side corner. And when he doesn't do that, which he has struggled to do all year, but really struggled to do against the Bucks, then you have the guy that was playing the weak side wing having to play two, kind of in like that weird zone man concept where you got a guy on the wing, you got a guy on the corner, and you got to make a decision. And the Bucks they're a good team with a lot of good shooters, so they made the right decision more often than not. Got a wide open shot out of a swing shoot, and that was kind of it. And that's all they did. Like you said, it was just scramble, right? They just put the Pistons in a scramble situation all game, all night, and the Bucks have great shooters. They currently have the highest percentage 3-point marksman in the NBA right now, and Taurean Prince, which at least they said on the broadcast.
Yeah. And I think AJ Green is top 5 too.
He's got to be up there. That guy can shoot, and it's a quick release too. But regardless, they've got great shooters. And when you have great shooters taking wide open 3-point shots, it's not bad luck that they're making it. That's not a viable defensive strategy to leave the guy open and just like, cross our fingers, hopefully he misses. Though I love George Bond and Greg Kelser, but that whole game and in the Celtics game too, they kept talking like, oh, they can't keep making all these threes. Like, this is just such bad luck. Oh my gosh, this pace is incredible. Like, we'll put a hand out, like guard it. That's not it's not a good defensive strategy. And of course, what then becomes kind of interesting is, so the Bucks find that little thread of weakness, right? And then the Celtics do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it goes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely not something that's viable, but hey, both like Milwaukee has Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, who aren't good matchups for the Pistons, and then the Celtics have Al Horford and Porzingis, so not ideal.
Porzingis was incredible, by the way. Oh my, he was so good. He's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, just not the best matchup, but I don't think that's makes it excusable, the looks that they were
No.
getting. And I thought it was also like Mimsy brings up in the chat, like offensive rebounds. Like, I thought, talking about Jalen Duren's defense, I mean, it didn't look great in either game, but I thought on the initial possession when the Pistons were on defense, like, there were points where I thought he was in the right spot, and if Al Horford or Porzingis was going to shoot a three, like, it would have been tough for him to recover. But I thought when there were a few plays, I noticed there was one specifically that stood out to me against Boston where they got an offensive rebound, and after the offensive rebound, Duren just got even more ball watchy, and it resulted in a corner three. So, I mean, those long offensive rebounds are situations where you kind of have to scramble anyway. So I understand it to a degree, but just like losing track of your man, and it wasn't just Duren by any means, but yeah, overall have to find a way to limit those, because when you can't expect teams to just not make wide open shots. If they don't, that's almost you being lucky. So yeah, we know these are two good shooting teams. So I think overall, just the roster itself is not fully, like, I think how JB's scheme is, and also just the roster, they're not fully built to take away those open threes when you have teams 1 through 5 who can shoot the ball. So it's just tough overall. Like, and honestly, I'm not sure if the answer is on the roster right now. Obviously, Asar sits against Boston, that hurts your defense. But yeah, two not fun games this week overall.
Yeah, and I think you're right to bring up, like, it really was not just Jalen Duren, right? So just looking at the Bucks in particular, going back through some of the notes that I had on it, like, there were times when, like, Jaden Ivey, Malik Beasley went under on a Damian Lillard ball screen. You can't do that against Damian Lillard. That's on them. That's not on the big that wasn't hedging high. He's never hedging high. Like, Duren was playing flat and Dame put the ball right over his head. It looks like it's on Duren. It's not. That's on the guard for not going over the top. There are others where it was just hand down, right? Cade Cunningham and Tim Hardaway Jr., specifically Tim Hardaway Jr., who it seemed like had the Damian Lillard matchup for at least a good portion of the evening. Many times hand down, Lillard just put the step back right over the top, and it was a late reaction. So this isn't 100% on Duren. You're right to kind of separate that out. But the thing with the scramble is your team is only as good in a scramble situation as your worst scrambled defender. And the problem is the Pistons have a couple of really bad ones, notably Jalen Duren and then Tim Hardaway Jr., I think, in my opinion anyway. And so the problem is, and the reason that the Bucks were specifically doing this in pick and roll was that the guy that you beat and then force a switch out of is the guy that has to kick out and scramble on the back end. So the guy that gets beat the worst is the last rotation out on that scramble. And if you beat Duren real bad in drop coverage, he's the guy that's got to kick out. Isaiah Stewart, when he gets beat real bad in drop coverage, he's the guy that's got to kick out. Paul Reed later in the game, he's the guy that's got to kick out. And they're just not getting there. they're just not. I don't know if it's effort or if it's focus or awareness of where you got to go, but it's a big problem right now. And it's a problem that's obviously magnified with how good both the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks are. But this is pretty consistent with what we've seen all season. It's just that these two teams, these two very good teams, saw it on film and said, we're going to just spam that until they stop us. And the Pistons never did.
Yeah, do you think it like what I'm wondering is do you think at this point it's bad enough for whatever the change might be to have it like rotation changes, but there wasn't really a group on the floor I felt like could stop it, and these two teams are gonna exploit it. But I just wonder if like we knew this was a problem before these couple games, and I just wonder now if we're gonna see any change as a result in it. I'm kind of thinking no, at least in the short term, but it's like something that needs to be addressed through trade, draft, free agency. Because yeah, the perimeter defense is just bad. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, it's been bad. Like YouTube user says, the perimeter defense has been terrible in every blowout this season.
Mhm.
Absolutely right. He's also got some good homeowner advice.
Wait,
for
I
you,
was
so I gotta
actually
pull that
gonna
up.
I was gonna put this in the chat, YouTube user, because that is definitely a thing. And my father-in-law was like, "Oh yeah, you should clean that." But with my furnace, it's like covered for some reason, so you can't get to it. So I just have to reset it to hope that resets it. That man, it's a whole thing. But I appreciate you because I think that's definitely contributing to it.
For all our other homeowners out there listening on audio, YouTube user's comment was the flame sensor is a common problem, and cleaning it can be a good temporary and easy solution. He says it happened to him. So there you go. You know,
Veteran.
talking about furnace maintenance. Yeah, YouTube user, the veteran here, leading us through the furnace problems. But so let's circle back. Let's talk about a little bit more with Jalen Duren. He's had a rough week, which I got to be honest with you, is incredibly disappointing with how he started against the Bucks. I thought that his first 6 minutes against the Milwaukee Bucks was possibly the best 6-minute stretch I have ever seen him play in his professional career. Over the past 2.5 seasons, that was, I thought, the most impactful he's ever been over a stretch. He was everywhere. He was blocking shots. He was getting steals. I'll read this off. His first quarter, 9 points, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block. He had no turnovers. He didn't have an assist either. But he was impactful, really impactful, especially against Giannis. I know he picked up those 2 fouls, but he was impactful on both ends. And it was really an incredible watch. I was ready after that first quarter to hop on this podcast and get all excited with you, talk about how good Jalen Duren played in that game. And then the rest of the game, 2 points, 4 rebounds, 3 turnovers, 4 fouls. And then, like you said, he was real bad against Boston. No answer for KP. So, man, what do we make of that?
Well, there was like one play, I think it was during the same stretch where he got switched onto Dame and like great on ball pressure, and Dame got a shot off, but Duren bothered it and Dame missed it. And I was impressed with that. And then
he blocked a Dame jumper.
It might be the same one, yeah. And then there was a similar possession on Giannis too. So yeah, I'm with you there. It was just I mean, I guess it's nice to see those spurts, but it's like how can you string it together? And I don't know if it's maybe things don't get going on the offensive end, and then it's not getting back, and then you're looking for where you're supposed to be, and things just happen too fast. But yeah, overall, I thought it was pretty rough. I'm with you though. I think for parts of the Bucks game, it looked good, and parts it didn't. And then overall against Boston, it was difficult. But we know that's not a good matchup for him specifically, and they're gonna try to exploit that. Like, I mean, unfortunately, I think a decent amount of teams do with how Duren plays defensively. So yeah, like I wonder if it'll spark any adjustments. I'm not really sure what those would be or what they should be, but yeah, it's a tough couple games overall. And yeah, YouTube user brings up he wasn't the primary problem in either game, and it was perimeter players. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think it was just the perimeter defense as a whole. But yeah, some of the things we're hoping for Duren like look good at some points, and other points it was just very up and down.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that we gotta separate a little bit that yeah, the perimeter defense wasn't good. So I would absolutely never argue that it was. It was pretty rough. But he's part of that. He's part of the perimeter defense with how often the Pistons need to get into ball screen coverage, just with how often pick and rolls are used as a form of offense in the NBA, and how often the Pistons do switch off ball screens as well. So Duren is part of that perimeter defense. And then on top of that, the role that he needs to play is pretty much the same role that they need out of Isaiah Stewart, right? It's that strong, under the basket player that gets a bunch of rebounds, ideally blocks and contests a lot of shots, and can just be disruptive as a drop coverage big with their length and athleticism. And one of those two guys is performing well in that role. The other's not. So like, just because the guards are being ineffective on defense does not absolve the fact that once they get around the guard and it gets to the bigs, two of the bigs are actually pretty solid at making a difference in those situations, and then one of them's not. And the one that happens to not be is the one that gets the most minutes, which is Jalen Duren. So this is, I mean, it's kind of an all-encompassing problem, and I know it's a little odd to be talking about a problem at that magnitude with a team that's still top 15 in defensive rating, but that's just kind of where we are.
Yeah, it's odd because I feel like a couple weeks ago we were talking about why the defense has improved, and we still have the same questions about Duren, and then these couple games happen where it really like highlights the holes and the weaknesses and everything. But yeah, on top of it, like I mentioned it, I think it might be scheme based a little, like how JB wants the defense to operate and protecting the paint, which Isaiah Stewart's done incredible at so far this season. Jalen Duren has had spurts, but overall looking for more there too. And I think it was like Koo from Locked On Pistons who brought this up. Like the team might just be too small, and I've wanted.
It's been your bugaboo for a while, yeah.
I mean, even if it's like, I know you're still trying to figure out Jalen Duren. Isaiah Stewart has been a positive, at least defensively for you, but I'm like, there should be someone with more length on the bench, at least as like a curveball you can throw, or just someone you can go to when you need it. I mean, that's not gonna happen overnight. Maybe there's someone you bring in at the trade deadline that can at least help you. But yeah, I wonder if you just need like some more size on this team, because when there's a Giannis or Porzingis and then another stretch big out there as well, it's just the lack of defense really just seems stark, and the Pistons get out into holes, and then it's tough to climb back. Like, even though they made the Boston game interesting, it's because Boston is a really good team and they were having a good game executing their game plan, but it just felt like they weren't, like the Pistons could never truly get back into that one. And it's difficult overall when you dig yourself a hole quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And really early on there, you mentioned, you kind of framed it as the defensive issues that are at that 5 position, right? That Duren kind of has are basically magnifying the other issues on the roster. I think that's a really, really great way to put it. Like it's the fact that your back line doesn't have a really high level reader of the offense that's coming at him and will react late on help. It's the fact that you'll get traps that don't look planned out of your big or missed rotations. Like it's stuff that, like, frankly, everyone is doing. It's not just one guy, right? It's not just one guy, but at the 5 position, it's so much more noticeable. Like, so this was a stretch. These were all back to back, I believe, in the second quarter against Boston. Late rotation on a Cornet cut, Cornet easy finish. Dern goes and traps Derek White and then just roams around. Cornet wide open 3, even though he missed it. That's notable. Dern then gets double teamed underneath the hoop, but doesn't kick it out because he was too stubborn. Ends in a turnover. You get a grab and go, threw it right out of bounds, and then a hand down, no contest on Kristaps Porzingis for 3. It's like when you stack it like that, it's just like it hits you over the face. It's so obvious. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. And then I'll let you respond to that, but then I think we ought to hit on that JB quote after the Celtics game about it being a privilege to start and the team needs to get out to better ones and maybe what he might mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think like Malik Beasley went crazy in the fourth to help make it interesting and had some runs, but it just feels unsustainable. Like some of the 35-40 point quarters that you're giving up are way too much to overcome. You have to find ways to just limit easy looks. Like I feel like that's all it comes down to. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but overall it feels like way too many possessions are ending in a wide open shot. And then when you have good teams, they're gonna take advantage of it. And it might be just fully personnel based, but I think long term that's 100% something that needs to be addressed.
Real quick, because I don't want to stay negative for too long here. Guys that played really well against the Boston Celtics. How about Cade Cunningham? 27 points, 14 assists, 9 rebounds. He shot 3 of 9 from 3, 11 of 21 from the floor. That's fantastic. Tobias Harris had 27 points as well. Only 3 rebounds, but 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Great night for Tobias Harris. I thought Ron Holland was very impactful.
Threes.
Yeah, made a couple threes. One of them cut out the Celtics from double teaming off of him. Really well-timed 3 out on the wing. I think it was late in the third quarter or early in the fourth quarter, but Cade was doing his little post-up thing against Derek White, I believe it was. They had Luke Cornett try to double off Ron Holland. Cade just kicked it right out to him. Holland nailed the 3. Like, that's awesome. Those are the timely makes that you need to see. And then add in the fact that he forced a couple of Peyton Pritchard turnovers. He was a good rebounder, good one more passer. I just thought he was real impactful. That was a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, Marcus Sasser Malik Beasley had a heck of a night, but how about Marcus Sasser coming in there in the first quarter, right? When Bickerstaff made his first rotation, the guys that got pulled, I thought it was noteworthy. It was Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey pulled for Stewart and Marcus Sasser. And I thought both of those guys came in and kind of helped. I don't want to say turn the tide because it was still kind of a blowout there in the first half, but they at least steadied the Pistons ship a little bit. It didn't get worse from that point. And that's not nothing. That was impressive, especially for a guy like Sasser who's kind of yo-yoed in and out of the rotation. And yeah, Bobby Bucket says, and Tim Hardaway Jr. pulled for Beasley. That was an important one as well. Tim Hardaway Jr., rough night.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was good how they were able to keep the Boston game fairly close and especially make a run at the end, even though it felt like there wasn't really a way that they were gonna pull it out. But again, the problems were happening on the defensive end of the floor, and I mean the offense wasn't the cleanest at times. Turnovers were a problem as well, but overall, like the stretch Beasley had in the fourth and a few big buckets that Sasser had a great night from Cade and Tobias. I thought that was positive as well. But yeah, overall, like I found myself in the Boston game just like watching the defense way too close because I knew what happened
Me
against
too.
Milwaukee was like already happening again. It was kind of like I felt I was sort of harping on that because it just felt like the glaring issue, which stinks. I mean, it won't be like that every game. But yeah, overall some nice nights from a few guys, which was good to see.
I want to shout out one play in particular from Ron Holland that I thought was kind of amazing. Actually, it was pretty amazing, and it's not even going to show up in the box score. It's not in the stat sheet, okay? But at the end of the third quarter, the Celtics go out on a break, kind of semi-transition. It wasn't a pure break. I think Ron Holland got beat in the backcourt on kind of a token pressure. They get the ball up to the corner and they kick it right back up to Peyton Pritchard, who's wide open on the right wing. At the point that Peyton Pritchard catches the ball, Ron Holland has not crossed half court. He's not even in the screen. But Peyton Pritchard takes about a half second too long to kind of like take stock of this wide open three that he's staring at. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Ron Holland, just like a blur, enters the screen and is right back in front of Pritchard and forces a non-attempt. No shot. No shot. So the Pistons end up, I think they got a turnover or maybe there's just a forced miss on that. But the Celtics had to play the full shot clock, try to get a shot up. It wasn't a wide open Peyton Pritchard shot, all because Ron Holland somehow got back in front. I don't know how, but he did. And it was an incredible play that literally there's no box score stat for that, but awesome play.
Yeah, the the effort is there 100%, which is awesome to see as he's only 23 games, 23, 24 games in now. But yeah, it's funny to me how Boston will like always go to Peyton Pritchard at either at the end of the shot clock or at the end of a quarter or half. Like, luckily he didn't make some of those buzzer beaters that he has so many times in the past. But I just thought it was funny that you kind of know where you're going, and he got out onto his own run against the Pistons. I think that was in the fourth quarter, but yeah, that was great from Ron Holland.
I agree with YouTube user here. Second efforts should be a stat. That would be awesome. I don't even know how you track that, but I wish that they did.
By hand.
That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, by hand, right? You need to have someone with consistent judgment calls making that stat. But last little shout out, and then we'll get into that quote from JB Bickerstaff. But how about Malik Beasley with the veteran? I'm passing this grenade off to Cade Cunningham to save my 3-point percentage tonight. Malik Beasley was 6 for 11 from three. Late in the fourth quarter, he had like 2 seconds. He was double teamed. He went up to shoot it, and then he kicked it over to Cade, and Cade just had to like pitch it up. Beasley's like, no, my stats. I need the percentages. That was a vet move from Malik Beasley.
You know what I appreciate about him is I think when he made those 3 threes in the fourth, the first one he made, I think the Pistons were down like somewhere between 15 to 20.
Moonshot from the corner, right?
Yeah, and like it was an incredible shot. Like he should have it had some sort of reaction to it, but he like stared back into the crowd. And sometimes if like the optics are like, okay, you're down by 15 or however many, like you shouldn't be celebrating a three like that. But I appreciate how he does that, and then he got the others and forced a Boston timeout and showed some personality there, which I love how you always get that out of him. I mean, it makes it super fun. And also shout out to Beasley, because I saw on the Bally broadcast, like when he made one of those threes, he entered into like the top 100 of all time 3-pointers made. I think he passed like Marco Bellinelli. Yeah. So shout out to Malik Beasley for that. I mean, he's just an incredible shooter. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I love what he brings. And like Bobby Bucket says here, so much swag. I think we've gotten a shimmy in almost every game. The energy's great. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
But let's
awesome.
look at let's look at that quote there from JB Bickerstaff after the Celtics game. I unfortunately don't have it in front of me. Poor podcast prepping. My bad, guys. But the gist of the quote was that essentially to start in the NBA is a privilege, and the starters have been getting out to, well, bad starts. So he commended the bench for being able to come in and kind of study the ship, get things going back in the right direction the past few games. He may have been talking, honestly, the past couple of weeks, because this isn't a generally new trend. This has been going on for a little bit. But regardless, the point seemed to be that these starters need to play better in these upcoming games. And I don't know if there's necessarily a threat in there, but he absolutely said the starters need to be playing better. So what did you think about all that?
Yeah, and I think one of the things he said too was just the importance of I guess beginning the game on time and
Right. Which I love the phrasing of that. Show up to work
yeah.
on time. Show up to the game on time, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because after his comments after the back-to-back they had after the Indiana NBA Cup game, and he was like, we were on the runway until the guys didn't get home until like 5 in the morning. And then this one was a little bit of a different tune. I mean, I think it's interesting in the sense on like if he's saying that publicly, like maybe he's thinking or getting pushed to the point of at least maybe not making a overall change in the long run, but at least like trying something new and seeing what works. I mean, I think where this team is, you can definitely at least experiment with that. Like, I don't know if it's as simple as trying to start Isaiah Stewart and bringing Jalen Duren off the bench for a game or two and seeing what happens. And I mean, you have to think like if like he didn't call anyone out specifically, but you can, I guess, just maybe read into who you think it's about or who it's not. But I would assume if there's a guy or guys that he thinks are helping the opponent get out to those early runs, like he's going to talk to them about it. And I think like the fact that he's saying it publicly, he's definitely had these conversations internally with these players one on one. And now it's just like, now that he said it to the media, like, are we getting to the point where they're at least going to try something new and see what happens?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I had the same reaction. I'm sure everyone who heard that and who's actually just heard it now, if this was your first time hearing it, listening to our show, had the same reaction you did. Like, look, it's kind of coming up to the time of year, right? The time of season where coaches abandon things that aren't working that they thought might work and start trying different things. We're coming up on that. I mean, what'd you say? This was game 24. Yeah, that was the 24th game for the Detroit Pistons. That's right on that barrier. If you guys remember, Dwayne Casey used to talk about, I think, like game 18 to 25, or not 18, 15 to 25 was kind of that range, that 10-game range where let's start seeing if maybe we can make some adjustments. We have enough sample size now to know if those trends from early in the season, if they held, if they changed, what's happened, what we expected to see. Are we surprised by anything? Things like that. So he is coming up on the point of the year where it seems like a lot of coaches make these types of changes. So I don't think that it's nothing that he went to the media, like you said.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm sure that those conversations have been happening behind closed doors already. They kind of have to have if it's kind of coming out to the media now. So yeah, I mean, as Bobby Buckets asks, do you think Bickerstaff is going to make a starting lineup change in the next couple of weeks, or maybe this is more of a strategy thing?
Yeah, well, I'll say it's also not just the start of the game, like it's the start of the third quarter too.
Absolutely. Yeah, great
Y-
point.
yeah, and so I think I think we'll see some tweaks to the starting lineup, but I don't necessarily think it'll be like that always. and I don't know, maybe coaches think differently, but I'm just in the mindset of like, why not tweak things if you're having the same issues game after game, and YouTube user brings it up. If you start Stu, I would put in a SAR for Tim Hardaway Jr. as well.
Seconded.
That's what I would think an adjusted starting lineup would look like when a SAR, whatever his restriction is over. He's able to play some more minutes. I would try starting him and start him alongside Isaiah Stewart. Stewart made a 3, I believe, was at the Milwaukee game. It was like the only one he's taken.
Yeah, it was. It was
the,
after Brook Lopez made him a little mad. It was after that double tech based on reputation alone.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd like to see him shoot some more threes, but I mean, it definitely helps with your defensive issues. The question is the offense with that one. But you know, I just don't think there's any harm in trying something new and having, like, you play the Knicks on Saturday. Why don't you try throwing that lineup at them and see if you're able to at least limit like Karl Anthony Towns out of the gate and see what happens. So I don't know. Overall, I think the five that's been starting all year, Cade, Ivy, Tim Hardaway, Tobias, and Duren is probably what JB wants to do. But I think at this point, like, I just don't think there's any harm in at least trying something new for a couple games, seeing if it sticks, because you can always go back.
I struggle with this one because, look, for me, they're 9-15. That's ahead of schedule. I mean, this is better than what I thought this team was going to be. I personally don't have an expectation that they're going to be competing for the play-in spot until the end of the season. I think it's possible that they're competing for it up until the All-Star break, but after that, you know, I'm a little skeptical. I know they've played a hard schedule, but they actually have a relatively hard schedule too, according to those strength of schedule makers the rest of the way. So like, I don't think it's going to get better. Yeah, QT says the December schedule is really tough, and they needed to win 2 or more in November. Yeah, that's probably accurate. So the thing is, if you want to be winning games, winning a lot more games and competing for that play-in, then yeah, you know, you'd probably want to make a change to the starting lineup right about now. I know Asar Thompson's kind of on a pitch count, and it makes sense. They're still ramping him back up. So do you look at maybe Ron Holland taking over that 3 spot in the interim until Asar Thompson gets fully healthy, so that you can have a little bit more of that perimeter defense with Isaiah Stewart out on the floor, since his floor spacing threat at least allows you the opportunity to do so. But look, if it's all about development still, and I think it should be, then continue to put Jalen Duren in this position to either sink or swim up until the trade deadline is probably a smart thing to do. Making sure that there's floor spacing around Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey as they continue to figure out how they might fit together, that's a pretty smart thing to do. Having Isaiah Stewart coming off the bench so that the majority of his minutes are alongside guys like Ron Holland or guys like Asar Thompson who bring about floor spacing concerns, that's a pretty good move, right? Especially when you're bringing Fontecchio off the bench too, and Malik Beasley and so on. So, like, YouTube user says, what do we do if we get worse by changing the starting lineup? They might. I think they might get worse without changing the starting lineup. It's just kind of, what do you want to value the rest of the way, right? Do you want to be winning a lot more games, or do you want to continue pushing for development up and to the trade deadline, which is probably where I'm falling right now. As critical as I am of Jalen Duren's defense, and as skeptical as I am that he's going to figure out that end of the ball, that side of the court, I still think your best shot is to put him in this sink or swim position and see if he surprises, right? And if he doesn't, then rethink things at the deadline. But right now, ride it out. I think I'd write it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get worse and you could make a quick change back, but like coaches probably don't want to do that. I mean, just how this team is, like I don't think there would be many issues with guys if JB tries something new and they're coming off the bench all of a sudden for a couple games. But I could be very wrong. Like different people take that in different ways. But overall, like, yeah, I get it. And you're evaluating what you want to do with Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey in the future after this season. So you want to put them in those situations as well. So like I definitely wouldn't be surprised at all if everything remains the same. But also based on those comments, I'm like, is he kind of thinking about just doing something different?
Well, and I guess I should say too that part of my thinking is that honestly, if you really wanted to win games with the roster that the Pistons have, you would, I mean, you'd probably do something a little bit like that pitching chaos that the Tigers did, right? You would not have the same starting lineup every night. When you're going up against a team like the Bucks, you'd probably want to be starting Asar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart. Against teams where you think you can maybe run them out of the gym and just score a bunch of points, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jalen Duren. You might go small against some teams like the Warriors and maybe stick Asar at the 5. Like you'd get flexible. You'd try to change things up night to night based on your matchups with the other team. Because look, they have a talent problem still. That's why they're 9-15. This is not an extremely talented team. This is a very young, very raw and rebuilding team. They don't have the top end talent outside of Cade Cunningham. And when you don't have that, if you're really trying to win games, you get flexible. And I'm just not sure that flexibility is great for development at this point, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now anyway. I'll let you respond and we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're playing the long game, like I think you still want to figure out who your number two is alongside Cade, have someone that brings the same kind of gravity to take a little bit of pressure off him. And then if you are playing the long haul and this team is playing you into a position for another high draft pick, like maybe you can bring that player in through the draft. Maybe there's a trade with the young assets that you have, whatever it might be, but that helps the long term as well, even though it makes what's going on right now a little difficult and honestly just like confusing night in and night out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am the big cheese is bringing up in the comments that Jaden Ivey's been really streaky too, and that's another good point as well. You know, hopefully that's something that Ivey can control. That would be really helpful to this Pistons team if he could consistently be the scorer that he flashes he can be every now and then. But I will say the thing with Jaden Ivey is that that's who he was at Purdue as well. His jumper
Mhm.
would show up for a week and then it'd be gone for another. There were some weeks where he was incredible offensively, unstoppable force, the engine for their entire offense. There are others where they needed to operate out of the post a little bit more with their 7-footers that Purdue team always has. I think Zach Edey was actually on that roster too, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But he was, yeah. Oh, good. Nice.
Yeah.
Go me. Anyway, yeah, I kind of think that's just who Jaden Ivey is. He's a streaky scorer and especially a streaky shooter, and not streaky in game, but like streaky week to week. So you probably want to build around that, or not around it, but with that in mind. And look, that's probably why he's a number 3, not a number 2 or a number 1, right? That's kind of just a limitation on him. Let's get to this question here from No Frown Motown. Kind of fun, over 20 games into the season now. So he says the draft class this past year was naturally not highly rated, but several players still seem to be doing pretty well, which is true. There are quite a few players making an impact right now. So he asks, with these 20 plus games of extra data, who would be your top 5 now? So going back to our big boards from before the draft, would you be changing anything after these 20 games?
Yeah, well, this question specifically, I just like jotted down a top 5 in terms of what I've seen so far. So obviously it's slanted a bit in terms of the opportunity that these guys are getting and what they've shown in this opportunity. I feel like if I'm doing a board on the current prospects and their potential upside for the future, it wouldn't look like this, specifically number 1. Like, I feel like I can't do a rookie big board right now without having Jared McCain at the top. Like, what he's done is so incredible. And I had him maybe a little higher than the consensus. I had him at 13 on my board. And I mean, just like the shooting first and foremost, but overall he does a lot more than that. He's strong, he has size, good rebounder for his position, and is just like a good basketball player. And then after that, like Steph Castle has been great for San Antonio. I was pretty high on him as well. I had him at number 3. And then after that, I like Zachary Risacher still. I mean, as a number 1 pick, I think it may not the traditional number 1 pick, but I think he is a good option. And I think he'll just have a long career. He's already shown that as well. And then after that, I mean, I know we were both higher on Dalton Connect than where he ended up going. I mean, I think a lot of people were, the whole age thing, but what he's done already for LA and just showing how he can pop scoring wise, I think he has to be in the conversation over some guys who definitely have more upside. And then after that, I'm going to cheat a little here because there's 2 guys that are in a similar lens for me. The 2 G League Ignite guys, Ron Holland and Matas Buzelis. With Buzelis, he hasn't like done a lot. He had a 20-point game the other night where he was 4 for 5 from 3. So I just like the upside he still has. And then Ron, kind of a similar story, but he's been able to show a lot more with the Pistons. So overall, no, I cheated a bit, but I'd go McCain, Castle, Risacher, Connect, and then Buzelis and Holland 5A, 5B, however you want to put it.
I still can't get there with Buzelis, but I was lower on him during that draft process.
Hey, like 6'10", and if he can shoot, man, like. But I get it.
It's the movement. I still just don't think he's a wing and he wants to play like it. But neither here nor there. I was looking back at my big board, and so I had number 1 Alex Sarr. I don't think I'd change that. I still think he probably should have gone number 1. And I know he's been a little rocky with the Wizards, but that was baked in. We knew that it was going to be a little bit iffy early on. He's still been an impact defender, and I think that's a pretty good thing. Number 2, if I recall correctly, because I lost this document, so I don't have it anymore. It got lost in a computer transition. But I believe number 2, I had Nikola Topic, and there's no new data there. So I can't, I'm just going to stand by that. When he plays next year for the Thunder, hopefully he plays really well and I'm justified. Otherwise, I'm going to have to drop him way down. But that was my number 2. Number 3, I believe I had Risacher, and I'm with you. I still like him top 5, especially if we're doing like a full redraft, right? With future potential and everything baked in. Number 4 would have been Reed Shepherd for me. Feeling good about that one. Feeling good about liking Reed Shepherd.
The Rockets just have too many players.
Oh my
gosh, young players.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What a luxury they have, and they still have a bunch more picks. They're in a great spot. They're in a great spot. But Reed Shepherd, I still think I'm super confident in there with him at 4. 5 was Connect. He went 17, like you said. We weren't the only ones that were pretty high on Dalton Connect. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that one as is. And then 6 was Salon, which is where he went, oddly enough. I'm gonna keep it, but I will say for the Pistons side of things, the biggest risers and guys that I think early on it looks like I was pretty wrong on are the one you already mentioned, which is Jared McCain. I think I had him down in the 20s. I wasn't super high on him. I thought it was just pure shooter. He's shown so much more than that. He's been so fun to watch for the Sixers. Definitely front line for rookie of the year so far, and that's not breaking any news. He's been that for a little bit at this point. And then Ron Holland. I think I had him maybe 8 or 9, and I'd move him right up there. I'll cheat too, since you did a 5A, 5B. I'll do a 6A, 6B. I think I'd probably have 6A Salon, 6B Ron Holland. Oh no. Move that down one. 7A, 7B. 6 would have to be Steph Castle, because I think I had him right around Ron Holland, and that's not. No, Steph Castle looks real good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think like I had Ron at 7 in my final board, and I feel like he was just so polarizing. Like some people had him really high, like even a few people that had him at
Yeah, I
number
think it was
1.
9, maybe 9
Yeah,
or 10 for
some
me.
people had him much lower than that. So I just think so far he's shown, like we talked last week on whether he has a say to be like a top 10 rookie. I think he's fringe there right now, but when you combine what he's done so far with still like the upside and improvement and how he's still young, I mean, he could turn into one of the better players to come out of this class. I mean, there's not the runaway star by any means, unless McCain truly turns into another Maxey, or when the Wizards guys get into a better situation, like what they become. But yeah, I mean, I think you can't, like, it seems right now that the Ron Holland pick at 5 was a shocker, but I feel like you can't really argue it right now, at least not this soon.
I know this is going to sound really weird, given that Ron Holland has not been a scorer for the Pistons, but one of the things I was most skeptical about Holland coming out of the Ignite program was his potential as a scorer. A lot of people talked about it, thought, he's a guy that if everything breaks right one day, he could average 25, 28, 30. He could be that kind of crazy wing scorer athlete that plays pretty good defense, and kind of that Jaylen Brown type of clone, right? That was the mold. That was the idea with Ron Holland. And that was why you saw some people have him up at 2, up at 1, 3, in that range, right? If people were that high on Ron Holland, that is what they saw. I was really skeptical of that. I thought the handle was pretty loose. I questioned what he'd be able to do in the half court in his rookie year, as well as long term. And I questioned the jump shot. I thought it looked okay, but the results obviously were pretty bad. Now, the jumper, nothing's really changed there. You just hope that you can bank on the form, and that's going to be something that comes around, that eventually the results will look as good as what his form looks like. But his ability to flash a little bit of creation in the half court with creative footwork, with kind of a natural handle. I know it's a loose handle, but he's also pretty natural and fluid with how he moves with it, and he can create space pretty well. His footwork's been very good, like I mentioned, on drives, the Euro step finishes, the change of pace within that Euro step. I think, honestly, he's been a very impressive kind of tight window athlete. He's obviously a very good full court, open court athlete as well, transition athlete, but his ability to move and slip through tight spaces and find crevices, and then still have the ability to explode and finish through contact and through defenders, has been so impressive to me, that even though he's averaging 6 points a game or whatever it is, and with the percentages he's averaging them, I genuinely want to wait before really investing in another 3, just for the idea that maybe it does click, and maybe he is that kind of stud scorer like a Jaylen Brown. Like, I see it now. I did not see it before. I see it now. I see the vision. So
Yeah,
that's
I
credit
mean,
to Ron.
yeah, it's always like the thing with it. I mean, a lot of players too. Like he's gonna need time, but it's just like, do you see the ability to get to the rim and explode, like you mentioned? I mean, he's clearly showcased that a lot to clean up, but I like the fact that he's in this stage where he still has a lot to improve and he's still finding other ways to impact the game, and he doesn't really seem afraid of anyone, which is impressive for a young player to go out there and be willing to guard whoever and go at anyone. So yeah, I could see him developing into that. I feel like it's going to be a unknown for a long time, and
Absolutely.
the Pistons have more time to work with him than some of the other guys, or at least in terms of making decisions. But yeah, I think see what it looks like through the rest of the year, and then keep going from there. Hopefully, he can show those marginal things and just like build on what he's shown already so far. I mean, if the shot starts falling, like I'm with you, it looks good. It just the results haven't been great, and that was always the thing, like you said. But man, if the shot starts falling, like a lot can change quickly.
So last thing I'll say, they'll throw it to you, and then we can wrap it up this evening and get out of here. But YouTube user says that his left hand, his dribble with his left hand, and his finishing too, has already gotten better in just a short period of time. Again, 24 games, and you can already noticeably see that he's gotten better using his left hand in game action. That's not the only thing I think he's gotten better at. He's gotten better at his change of pace in the half court. He's gotten more decisive in transition. You've seen those charge calls go down. That's a product of his decision making. And that's just two off the top of my head. I'm sure if I go back through game notes, we can find a couple other things where game 1 to game 24, he has noticeably gotten better at. And I just want to throw this out as an open question. You don't have to answer, and no one has to answer because I don't think it's going to be a fun one to answer. But how many other young guys on this Pistons roster that they have drafted since Cade Cunningham can you point to and say in 24 games they have noticeably improved on multiple items? Noticeably. It's obvious. It slaps you in the face.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely tough when you put it that way.
I'll
I think
leave it there.
yeah, I mean I think the only other thing I'd add with Holland is his confidence as well is super impressive. Even after that first Milwaukee game with the missed free throws, it didn't seem like he's wavered, and teams are going to give him open looks, but it doesn't like he's turning some of them down, but it seems like he's still a willing shooter, and maybe you don't want him even taking some of those shots. But overall, I like how he plays confidently. He seems like sure of what he's going to do, and like he doesn't have as close to as much on-ball juice as he did in the G League, but decision making and the turnovers were a huge concern, and he's like limited those, but he's not being put in those situations a lot, so it's a little you can go whichever way you think. But yeah, I think he's been a positive overall, and I'm excited to see where it goes, because yeah, it seems like he's getting better in the short period of time.
All right, I lied. This will be the last thing. This will be the last thing I say. I promise. I got nothing more after this. Bobby Bruck gets brought up Asar Thompson as maybe another guy that made a leap. I'm no comment on that. But how many times have we talked about on this show that Asar Thompson needs to turn down some of those open looks and close the space, right? Close the space, try to get to the rim and make a play, be that a kick out or a finish through traffic or get to the foul line. That was something we talked about with Ron Holland through the first like 10 or 12 games. We haven't anymore. We stopped because he fixed it.
Yeah.
He's picking his spots. 24 games. This is all it took. And he's doing it. It's incredible. It's awesome. It's really fun to see.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I don't know how much upside the shot has, but I have more confidence in him developing that than like Asar. I mean, that's not a big thing to say really, but
we're both on record saying that's not super important to Asar's role long term, which I stand by. So
yeah.
No shot to Asar. He's good.
Mainly I just hope that the shot starts falling for Ron, because like imagine if he becomes like, I don't think he'll ever be a true floor spacer, but like if he has to be guarded closer, like that just opens up everything else. And I mean, I hope it for his personal development as well as like what it could do for this young group overall. So I think I don't know. I I believe in it. I don't know if he's ever going to be a extremely great shooter, but I think he can at least be average.
As a guy who was very skeptical of the player coming out of the draft, count me on the Ron Holland bandwagon. And I think
There you
that's where
go.
we're going to have to end this episode of pro Ron Holland propaganda.
There you go. No, he's been super fun to watch. But thank you everyone for tuning in. We're recording on Thursday before the Lions are playing Thursday night football. So go Lions. Hopefully we get a different result with that. And then we come out, the Pistons play the next Saturday, and we have some more exciting games to talk about. So reminder, everyone can call the phone line to ask a question and hear your voice on the show. The number for that is 313-355-2717. If you can, like the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, leave a review, rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Really helps us out. And special thanks to Sean Corp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys again for all the great questions and talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball with you all.